Someday, whether you believe it or not, the time will come when you are unable to earn an income. And when that day comes, you better have a bag of money big enough to take care of you and yours. Most people are running around all the time looking for more. How do I make more on my investments? You see them jumping from one investment advisor to another because they promise they can make a higher rate of return than the other guy. Or last year, what was your rate of return? Well, that's not good enough. As a result of that, they keep chasing this more philosophy. And I follow the philosophy that was developed by a friend of mine, Jim Schwartz, and we call it the enough philosophy. What's enough to get you where you want to go? That's a foundation of financial planning. And when you do that, you don't have to chase return, you can chase your goals. After 50 years of financial planning, I've come to realize that most people have no idea of what financial planning means, even though the term is very popular in today's economy. What we're going to show you in the next 20 minutes is how the concept of financial planning can put you in a better place than investing your money at a very high rate of return. Let's start with the most important concept that you have to grasp. What is the resource from which I become wealthy? Whatever you earn, that's all there is. There isn't any more, and there isn't any less. If you don't like what you earn, you have to go out and earn more. So you have to live within the constraints of what your income is now. So whatever that income is, now we're going to use it. The first use of your money is Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam comes by and says, pay me taxes, pay me taxes. And not only does Uncle Sam come on board, but the state does. You pay state income tax, sales tax, but that's the first use of your money. So whatever you're making, now you've lost some of it to taxes. The next thing you do with your money is you try to provide housing for yourself. And you may rent an apartment or a house, or you may buy a house. The problem with the house is people have been told for years that a house is an investment. A house is not an investment. The fact is that when you own a house, it costs you money to own it. You don't think of the things like you had to buy the lawnmower, the landscaping, the repainting it every so many years, fixing the driveway, hot water heater blows up, the furnace has to be replaced. All those things are costs that contribute to quote-unquote the value of your house. The truth is, if you buy a house, when you sell it for exactly the amount of money you've invested in it. There are a few exceptions, of course, but in general, you are paid exactly what you've invested in the house. I've had clients track it for over 30 years, and that's where I get my evidence. So you made money, you paid your taxes, you paid for your housing. Now you have to insure all those things you own. You have to insure the car, the house, etc. And that's another cost. That's another erosion of your income. After that, the next thing is you have to spend money on liabilities. I know you didn't pay cash for that house. You probably didn't pay cash for your car. So therefore, you have to pay the bank or whomever you borrowed the money from. So the liabilities. Now, the problem with liabilities is that if you owe money to anyone, you are trapped. A lot of people, when the Great Crisis happened a few years ago, weren't able to, say, move from one state to another to take a job because they had a mortgage on their house and they were underwater, no one would buy their house, and so the liabilities trapped them in a state where they couldn't get a job. You need to be debt-free. Now, you've earned your money, you paid taxes, you provided housing, you bought insurance on those things, you're paying the liabilities, and now you're living. And then, after all of that, if there's anything left over, you're going to save it. Now, that's not my philosophy. That's the normal way people think with their money today. What's the problem with that concept? Well, guess what? There's never any money left over, and so people don't save. They tell me they can't fund their 401k plans. They don't even fund enough to take advantage of the match that the employer is providing. But if you do save, that savings, which could only come from your earnings, those savings become investments. And as you make those investments, then you make a profit. However, you have to know the next lesson, which is you never spend that profit until you retire or you meet the goal that you're saving and investing for. So don't eat your children's children, as I read in a book one day. That's your compound interest. A lot of people get trapped in a number. They think in terms of, if I have $100,000, I'm doing fine. And so they get up to $100,000 and then they take a vacation. Then they work back up to $100,000 to buy a new car. Well, I paid cash for the car, John. Yeah, but of course, you eroded your bag of money that you need to provide for you and yours when you eventually get to the place you cannot work anymore. Remember, someday, whether you like it or not, you're not going to be able to provide an income. Let's talk about goal planning and financial planning and how it can impact and benefit you so you don't have to take the risks that you may be taking now in investing. Let's start with picking two major goals. Let's say that you're planning to fund the education of two children, and that's going to be a cost of savings of $7,000 a year. Further, let's say you're going to retire in 30 years, and for you to retire at the level you want to retire, you have to set aside now $25,000 a year every year for the next 30 years. So let's look at it. Let's suppose you made that $100,000. You're paying taxes, let's say, of all those taxes, roughly $30,000. The housing is costing you about $20,000. The insurances are costing you, let's say, $5,000. Your liabilities are $4,000. The education goal about $7,000. And your retirement goal, $25,000. And so now here comes the shocker. Your lifestyle, your living money is $9,000 a year. You see, people get in trouble because they say, I'm making $100,000, and they spend like they really are making $100,000, when the fact is they have $9,000 to live on. So that's an important understanding as far as financial planning goes. So let's do some planning. Let's suppose that we can set up a way that when you save your money, when you invest your money for your future, that those earnings are not currently taxed. Because, of course, now when you invest your money, if you make a profit, every year you pay taxes on it. So let's suppose we can tax defer the taxes on the earnings. So go all the way down, you make your 100 and so on down the line. What this does is it impacts your savings goal and reduces it to $16,000 a year. And where does that profit, the difference, go? It goes right to your bottom line. And now instead of only having $9,000 a year to live on, you have $18,000. So you give yourself a bonus and a boost, and you really should be getting excited about that. In addition, if you decide you can retire earlier than 30 years now, this could cause you to be able to retire in 25 years. Let's go one more tool. Let's suppose that we can make your savings tax deductible and, of course, continue to have tax-deferred earnings. Same thing. All those expenses we talked about are still there, but your retirement goal is now costing you still $16,000. However, you can now retire in 23 years instead of 30 years or even 25 years if you so choose. Let's go one more. Let's suppose that you've learned the lesson that you should be investing and saving your money for whatever goal you've proposed at the beginning of the year, not the end of the year. What we want you to do is save your money at the beginning of the year, January 1, whatever the amount of money is, into that program. So let's say we can do that now. We can make your contributions be tax deductible. Guess what? Your retirement planning savings now is reduced to $15,000 a year. So we started out at $25,000 a year. Now it's only $15,000. Your lifestyle is now up to $19,000 a year. So through planning, your lifestyle improves now and in the future. How does this compare to investing? Well, most people are taking their incomes, they're looking for these hot investments. They're jumping from one investment advisor to the other because this is a promise of more return. That guy can do a better job. And they're looking about return, return, return. That's like going to Vegas and betting on the whatever you bet on and saying, well, I've got to hit. I've got to make a profit here so that I can win. And of course, as you know, those are the folks who lose at gambling. What is the equivalent rate of return you would have to earn after taxes to get to the same end that I showed you by using these tools we're going to discuss further? You would have to earn in your investments every year after taxes for 30 years, 13% per year. Do you know of an investment that can assure you that you can make that kind of profit? Probably not. So what we have is a population that is out there chasing return because they think return is the solution, when indeed financial planning is the solution. So let's talk about the ways to attack these uses you have. Let's start with the taxes for now. There are 4 basic methods for reducing taxes. The first method is splitting. We'll go into that in a minute. The next method is deferring. The next is converting. And the last one is sheltering. Let's suppose you have your $100,000 that I've been using for illustration purposes only. You're making $100,000 and you're paying roughly $30,000 a year in income taxes. Let's suppose there was a way that you could split that income, and you found that for your lifestyle you only needed $60,000 a year, and you could isolate that 60 and take it, and that would mean then you're paying $18,000 on the 60, and the other 40 would go somewhere where we could reduce the taxes and only pay $6,000 on it. So now your taxes, instead of being $30,000 a year, would drop to $24,000 a year. Let's suppose we can do it again. Let's suppose we can take that 40 we set aside and split it once more into two components. By the time we did that, we could get your taxes down to $21,000 plus. So through this concept of splitting your income, because remember what the government wants is they want to roll it all up in one big ball, because the bigger the ball, the bigger the taxes they get. You, on the other hand, want to split it up into many small pots so you could reduce the overall taxation. Let's talk about deferral. Let's not talk about the fancy forms of deferral. Let's talk about some simplistic things that are available to you right now. For example, Series EE bonds. You realize you don't pay taxes on those until you cash them in. How about annuities? Same thing, taxes are deferred. How about installment sales? You have an investment, something you want to sell. You can set up an installment sale, pay the taxes over a period of time. How about certificates of deposit? Certificates of deposit, that's what I said. You've heard the commercial, subject to penalty for early withdrawal. Why do they say that? Because the interest is paid later. If you have a 1-year certificate, you get the interest next year. So if you know you're going to have high income this year, lower income next year, you could take advantage of that by buying the CD, having it mature next year, paying the interest at a lesser rate than the higher rate you're paying now. Same is true of Treasury bills, Treasury notes, Treasury bonds, and even corporate coupon bonds. So keep in mind, these are some simple tools for deferring your income. Let's look at the next one, convert. What do you want to convert? We're talking about your income. The first thing you want to do is convert non-deductible expenses into deductible expenses. And there are definite ways to do that. The next thing you want to do is convert as much of your ordinary income into capital gain, because as you may know, the capital gain rate is less than the ordinary income rate that you're currently paying. Let's go further. Let's take one tool to make this point very evident. Let's pretend that we're going to isolate $2,900 of your $100. You're still making $100, but we're going to isolate $2,900. And you don't have any tool available, so you just take the $2,900. You pay full income tax on it. That's going to be roughly $870. You're going to invest that and pay the taxes as you go. And at the end of 30 years, you're going to have $191,000. Good for you. That's better than most. Let's suppose, on the other hand, that there is a tool that allows you to deduct the amount of money you want to save for your future. So we take the $2,900 and we invest in that tool, let's say $2,000 a year. Well, that leaves us still $900 of taxable income. We pay some tax on that. We invest what's left, pay taxes as it goes, and at the end of 30 years, we have $59,000. What you see immediately is this tool has created extra income for investments. Outside of the tool, we've created extra income for investments. So what happens now? Let's suppose that we take that tool and as I said, it's deductible, so you don't pay any tax on that. You invest it. You don't pay taxes on the profit until you take it out. That will grow to be, assuming, again, we're making 10% per year, that will grow to be worth $328,000 plus. If you did the dumbest thing in the world and you pulled out the whole thing in a lump sum, paid full bore taxes, you're going to pay $98,000. That would be crazy. But even if you did that, you're going to still net $230,000 plus the money you have from the extra that the tool created, that $59,000. And so your total now, when you're 30 years out, is $289,000 because you use this tool, as opposed to $191,000 because you didn't use the tool. Are you beginning to grasp the concept of planning and the impact it has? By the way, that simple tool could be an IRA. What if the tool you had available did not provide for a tax deduction when you put the money in. You know what? Some people buy municipal bonds. Those are not tax deductible. But let's take the tool and let's say, okay, I'm going to take the $2,000. I'm going to invest it. The other money, I'm paying the full board taxes on the $2,900, so I don't have any extra over there. So I invest my $2,000. It grows on a tax deferred basis. And at the end of the 30 years, I'm going to have $328,000. Now, again, if I take it out as a lump sum, I'm going to pay $80,000 in income tax. The taxes are less because I'm only paying on the earnings as opposed to the total amount. So my after-tax profit is roughly $248,000 as opposed to $191,000 where I was trying to do it outside of the use of a tool. Planning matters. Planning can make the difference. Let's really be wild here now. If you understand the concept that it's important to save money early, not later, that it's important to put the money in January instead of April, that you want to fund your IRA, but you do not have the money on January 1st. Let's suppose you do a crazy thing and you borrow the money to fund your IRA. So let's suppose we put $2,000, we're going to borrow $2,000. So we borrow $2,000, and let's be really crazy and say you have to pay 12% interest on that $2,000. So the loan cost is an extra $133 for that year because come the end of the year, you're supposedly going to have the $2,000 to pay it off, plus the interest, of course. Well, that extra interest, that $133 could have been invested if you didn't borrow the money, so we have to look at that cost, and that 30-year cost is going to be about $21,000. Well, how does that compare? Well, the cost to wait 12 months to invest your money is $31,000 plus dollars. The cost to borrow is $21,000 plus dollars. There's almost a $10,000 benefit to you taking advantage of investing earlier rather than later. Again, this is financial planning. This is not investing. The investment is irrelevant here. What means something is the planning that's in your program. So, let's go one more. Let's talk about your children and your education. Let's suppose you wanted to educate your children, and we estimated earlier that your cost was roughly $7,000 a year. And let's just suppose that you had an availability that you could employ your child in your business. So now let's look at the contrast. If you make the $7,000 plus dollars, you have to pay taxes on that, which are going to be roughly $2,200 in my illustration. It's going to net you about $5,000, and then you're going to have to pay the tuition of your kid, which is about $6,000. Not a good deal. Let's suppose instead you could employ your child, pay your child a salary of $6,000. The child pays a little bit of income tax at the child's rate. This is different from the kiddie tax because this is earned income. This is planning again. So the kid pays taxes of roughly $360, and now the child pays her own tuition of $6,000, and the parent, because you didn't have to pay taxes on the full amount, you still had that $1,200 after you paid your kid a deductible $6,000. You have a little money that you've invested, and that can grow to be worth some money down the future as well. There are many techniques in planning that allow you to succeed in your goal that have nothing to do with investing. Planning is not investing. Most people confuse it with that fact. That's why most people do not succeed in their financial plan, because they end up chasing more because they're looking at return as their solution. It's not return, it's planning.